So I think it's time to start, and welcome to this presentation of the book that was edited by Martin and covering several countries from Eastern Europe. This project is the end of a long story that started 5 years ago. With at least 5 years ago, perhaps even more, with a demand of the trade union in US, AFL-CIO, to participate to the research of what is the behavior of the European multinational in US. And there was a report done at this occasion to see if there is a different behavior of the European multinational when they are in US, or they import, let's say, was the question, the Mitbestimmung, the German model or the French model, or the Swedish model, where they are in US. And the answer was rather not so surprising, not so much, but some were rather open to have a little bit different practice than the standard practice in US. And from there was the idea also to look at Europe, and that's the project. And we had a previous publication on it, and to see how are the behavior of the multinational company when they invest in Central and Eastern Europe. And that's the book, and with two different sector, very different sector, retail and automotive. And having read the book, sometimes you have some surprise, because normally we think that the automotive, there is a kind of stronger and better situation, but it was not always the case, at least not in all the countries. So there is a lot of variation that make the case much more interesting, that you have a kind of single story. But it's not me to present the book. We have for that all the authors and Martin who coordinate that. So I give him the floor to have kind of an overview, and then each author will present their chapter in 5-7 minutes. And as we have many authors, I will stop them after 6 minutes. I will just say conclude. So we have the possibility to have question and discussion, because this presentation attract a lot of interest. So thank you all the speaker for coming. Thank you for this interesting, very interesting book. And Martin, you have now the floor.
Good. If I can share the screen. Has that worked? Is that is the screen sharing?
Yes, but you have on the left, you have all the diapositive.
Yeah, we'll live with that. I can't get it to work.
Make it just we have only the.
We've tried, and it's there were technical problems. Let's live with what we've got. So I'm going to introduce the research project. As Philippe has said, there was a stimulus from the United States that they were involved in trying to see whether European multinationals could be persuaded to have as good an attitude towards trade unions in the United States as they do at home. This is the analogy. We look at Western European companies in new member states, 6 countries: Czechia, Hungary, Poland, Romania, Slovenia, and Slovakia. We took 2 different sectors in each one, automotive and retail. Different in a number of respects, one of them being that if it's an automotive company, it maybe is competing with jobs and employment conditions in Western Europe. If it's a retail company, not so much. We thought there might be different stories. And we had 2 companies from each country that we looked at. Interviewed trade union representatives, a few from management, not very many, that didn't really work. To be honest, I don't think they would have given us such revealing stories. And apart from that, managers do differ. It was very clear that if you're looking for a common company culture within one company, there may be different things. A number of the trade union representatives asked for the company's name not to be mentioned because they were scared that they would have possibly in the worst cases even legal action taken against them. So I don't think management representatives would have told us very much of greater interest. To remind you what the problem is, there is a very substantial wage gap in countries of Central and Eastern Europe relative to Western Europe. And here I have the nominal wage as a percent of the German level, how it has caught up over the years in these 6 different countries. Slovenia, as you can see, substantially closer to the German level. The others, well, barely touching 50%. So if you're an automotive company and say in Western Europe, 10 to 15% of your costs are going in wages, to halve the wage or take it down to even a third of that level is a very substantial saving. And that is, for them, the big attraction in these countries. You'll also see up to about 2008, there was some catching up. After that, not so much. It seems to have leveled off. We have a substantial gap still. So trade unions, what do they do? What are their methods? Sometimes they have inherited organizations from the pre-1989-90 start. Particularly Volkswagen was likely to do that. They've taken over a company that exists. And so the union is recognized. There are still conflicts, but they're not conflicts over recognition. Those are the cases where we get strikes over wages and things of that sort that are more familiar elsewhere. Otherwise, if we're starting up a union organization from scratch, it's often a very slow and hard start. The people trying to get the union organization going have to win trust on both sides, from the other employees and from the management, very cautious. And the first thing that they're likely to use is laws that give employees protection that employers are simply not respecting. So that's the first way that they're likely to get going. If they're accepted, if they're recognized, if they can begin bargaining and actually get some results, even then they can be quite small gains that they make, and they treat that as a significant success. It varies very much between companies. There's no guarantee if they recognize unions at home that they will do so in these countries. And it varies between countries. In Slovenia, generally, the best conditions for unions, although not perfect, it doesn't mean it's a straightforward, easy ride. Romania and Poland seem to be very much worse. So what helps unions? What enables them to get somewhere? Well, the context of the country makes a difference. If people are more likely to think of unions as being a protection and something that they should join. Also, if there's outside support from society, other social actors, sometimes even political leaders. So if you can get support from outside, maybe that's a help, and that varies. Use of the media. Media coverage can be extremely embarrassing for retail companies, particularly because they depend so much on how the public perceives them. Also for the automotive companies, because it goes back to Western Europe and they're told, look, you're not respecting labor rights there and trying to cut our wages as well to get them down as well. So if the media is friendly and you can use it, that's helpful. But sometimes it's even seen as such a provocation by the management that the union side is very cautious and sort of agrees, okay, we won't give you bad publicity, and finds that that helps. But when it can be used, it can be very effective. if there are strikes, they're very rare. There's an economic theory that tried to make sense of strikes and said they're like car accidents. If both sides know their strength, there should never be a conflict reaching that stage. But it's just like driving on the road. Every now and then there's an accident anyway, and that's what a strike is. I don't find that all that convincing a view, but there is one thing in common, that car accidents are what determine a whole lot of rules and practices in driving a car. And similarly, if there is a conflict that comes to a strike, it has quite a big impact on determining relationships from then on. A union's generally very cautious, but when there is a conflict, it can be important in setting the relationship. The international context, and you get help from outside, there are very mixed views and quite a lot of negative views towards Western European colleagues and European works councils with the trade unionists in these countries. A fair number of them say, we're not respected and it doesn't really work. But when there is international help, it can be decisive and an extremely important element, particularly if you have a global agreement with a company and the company is not respecting trade union rights in another country. It's something which the trade union representatives in the company's home country can come back and say, look, you're not implementing this agreement. We entered into this agreement and you're not doing it. And that, combined with an active union in the country the company has gone to, media coverage and the rest, can be a very effective way of making progress. So we put the question, can multinational companies be good for trade unions? And well, they can be. They aren't automatically. They don't transfer their practices. But if unions use the best methods that they can, it is possible to make some sort of headway. But I think the conclusion will come from when we've heard the contributions from the different countries, from the people who did the research in those countries. So thank you very much. That's the end of my introductory presentation. Okay, back to Philippe. You're mute, are you?
Unmute. Okay. Okay, thank you, Martin. And we will continue with the presentation, and we will go from as to present the best case to the worst. So we start from Slovenia and Branko, who is assistant professor in Ljubljana, University of Ljubljana. And we will finish with Poland and Romania in between the other countries. So thank you, Branko. And if you can say a little bit more about your case, once again, 5 minutes, 7 maximum.
Thank you, Philippe. I will be sharing my screen too. So, can you see the presentation? All right. Slovenia, in general, there was a surge in FDI relatively late. Slovenia has relied on domestic accumulation, unlike most of other Eastern and Central European countries. And also the other thing is that the distinctive feature is that it featured a kind of a neo-corporatist industrial regime. Now, after 2013, then when Slovenia was in crisis after 2008. 2013 was the bottom of the economic crisis, or the peak of economic crisis. And at that time, many of the highly indebted companies, both private and state-owned, were sold to foreign investors, and so we had a kind of a surge of FDI, of foreign capital penetration, only only after 2013, after 2014. And there is of course a question here: how do foreign multinational corporations and their penetration into the country influence industrial relations and trade unions in particular? Now, I had first a view on a macro perspective, and here I was not able to establish a clear link between weakening of Slovene corporatism and FDI penetration, simply because the weakening of neocorporatism in Slovenia came before the surge in FDI. And if we look at the period after the FDI started to increase, that is after 2013, there were no significant or abrupt changes in industrial relations that, I mean, the aggregate industrial relations indicators such as union density and collective bargaining coverage. Also, when I interviewed the sectoral trade union representatives in the private sector, they said that, well, they don't see major differences between domestic and foreign owners as regards their, I mean, in respect to collective bargaining, both at the sectoral as well as the company level, and also in regards to their relation to trade unions. So, summa summarum, at the macro level, there was no clear evidence of negative impact of FDI on industrial relations or trade unions in Slovenia. The picture is different when we look inside the companies at the quality of industrial relations. Now, firstly, there were most of the companies, I mean, most of the FDI was brownfield in Slovenia, and I also had mostly brownfield investment here. And these were investment in relatively established companies. I mean, these were companies that managed to get through the loss of the Yugoslavian market, which was very hard, of course. Also, the transition from the socialism to capitalism, and then also they were able to withstand in the EU competition. So that means they were relatively technologically developed with relatively strong, I mean, research and development departments, and there were quite well established presence of trade unions in three of them. One was Greenfield, and here the unions had yet to be established, but they were in the past few years. And also collective bargaining was established practice. Now, the case studies show a strong negative impact of change in ownership. There were attempted shifts in balance of forces in favor of capital and management. And when there was transfer of practices from West, this brought mostly worse standards. Most notable changes were at the institutional level. For example, the most common case was that there was a change from shareholding company to a limited company. There were two such cases in my study, as it is in the book. But in the meantime, also in the third brownfield company, the same development took place. So with the supervisory board, which gets eliminated in these cases, also the seats for workers' representatives were eliminated. Besides the institutional level, there were also other developments such as union bustings, threats with major redundancies, the established channels of union membership recruitment were disrupted, and so on and so forth. Now, how did unions respond? The traditionally cooperative we could also say to a certain extent bureaucratic trade unions in Slovenia were, when they were challenged, mostly able to add some kind of adversarial elements to their strategies, which paid off mostly, and they were deploying various power resources. Most effective weapon was, of course, mobilization, but this requires quite a few power resources. Then unions were also able to use institutional devices such as minimum wage increase, the works councils, and also the established collective agreements. But when basic resources proved insufficient, they resorted to kind of borrowed resources. So they entered coalitions and open to local community, which I think I find as the most interesting finding in my research. This coalition building and their opening to the local community and to other actors, as Martin already mentioned, presents maybe a chance not only for their radicalization, but maybe also to their renewal. So thank you. That was my presentation.
Thank you. I think it's very clear, and perhaps we can return in the debate about the coalition building to see a little bit in a more transversal way in discussion between you or you think is important in general. So now we move to Czechia with Monica. Monica is researcher at CELSI and also teach at Charles University. So thank you for being there, and let's present the slides are already there.
Yes.
Nice. Thank you.
Can you see it? Yeah. Okay. So you can see my presentation. Maybe I can enlarge it. Okay. So I just very briefly will present a case in Czechia. I think it's quite other way around as Branko presented the Slovenian case, that the importance and the high presence of foreign direct investments were so huge in Czechia, partially also Slovakia. Just to illustrate this index of foreign control, which express the level of presence of foreign investors and foreign companies in Czechia, Slovakia, and Hungary. They are among the top 3 in this respect. This is the index for automotive. Also, the situation is similar for retail sector, which we covered as well in the chapter. Out of 10 biggest retailers in Czechia, there are only 2 in Czech ownership. So the rest is owned by the other companies from elsewhere in Europe. So I will go directly to the cases and to the sectors, comparing a bit. So in terms of industrial relations, both sectors conduct rather decentralized collective bargaining at the company level. In automotive, the estimated unionization rate is 30%. And the collective bargaining is mostly present at OEMs, tier 1 companies, and it is less frequent at small companies. In retail, the unionization rate is even lower. It's only about 6 to 7%. It's also, there are several factors behind it. One of them is the high level of flexibilization of labor in retail, and quite difficult conditions for trade unions to recruit members in these flexible and actually unstable working conditions. In both sectors, we can say that employers prefer company level bargaining. because of the competition in the sector, labor shortages and wage differences, and this also causes these wage differences and labor shortages. So in each of these sectors, trade unions, despite having some sectoral level organization in each and every company where the trade union was or is or they meant to be established, they have to fight for their rights and for the collective bargaining to be present. So we had quite diverse evidence from these countries. Basically, quite a lot depends on how trade unions are established in multinational corporation. I would distinguish, so either we have greenfield investments and trade unions have to start from scratch a new workplace, and then the establishment of industrial relation or social dialogue in the company is mostly by conflict. Then there are few cases when works councils are firstly established, which is an organization which cannot bargain collectively, but have some rights on information at the company level. So then it's a bit more cooperative when this work council transformed to the trade union. And then we have brownfield investment. So when the multinational company bought Czech-owned company during the transformation, and then trade unions are sort of bought by the multinational, so they are already there. And what we observe is like relationships are more cooperative in that case. What we describe in the chapter are mostly the cases of trade unions establishment and fight for social dialogue in greenfield investments. And we show the importance of the external pressure on employer, which is done via strike alerts and media presence. It's not directly strike, because this is quite difficult to conduct according to the local legislation, but it's mostly a strike alert and medialization of the case. And and after several of such events, as Martin Mayen mentioned in his introductory presentation, the social dialogue normalized. Yeah? So after these like car accidents, I like this parallel, the social dialogue normalized between management and trade unions. But it's like a constant fight for each and every euro for wages. In a chapter, we describe two cases in automotive. It's Valeo, French-owned subsidiaries, and Hyundai, South Korean-owned subsidiary, where I think in both cases we found the evidence for importance of industrial action. In many cases, the threat of strike or like very short strike even after the working time was enough to move forward collective bargaining at the company level. In retail, we describe Albert and Tesco. Both are foreign-owned retailers in Czechia. In Tesco, it was interesting case that Tesco merged with some smaller retailers in Czechia, and by these mergers, they inherited the trade union within one of these companies. And it turned out to be quite active trade union with quite active leadership. And this is how they managed to have collective bargaining for the whole Tesco, because also trade unions in Tesco are quite fragmented. So they find a way how to coordinate the collective bargaining for the whole chain in different regions with different wage levels. Yeah. And in both cases, or in all four cases, we show the importance of media coverage of the conflict. Yes, and what I forgot to mention, in retail, more than industrial action, it turned out to be the importance of international ties. So this international cooperation was much more important and much more having a leverage in international in retail than in automotive industry. So this is for my side to introducing the chapter. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, Monica. And from the first two presentation, and I asked the participant if they have question already to put that in the Q&A, so we can prepare the debate. Is the kind of the difference between greenfield and brownfield and heritage trade unions, as you said, but also the role here of the media, which is we can also. Kind of, or you use coalition or media seems to be also something rather important. And what is a little bit counterintuitive is that the solidarity seems to play a broader role, a more important role in retail than automotive. I think normally you say, okay, it's case studies, so perhaps we cannot generalize that, but that's interesting, at least for the debate. So now we move not so far from Czech, because we are in Slovakia with Pavel, and I give you the floor, and thank you for being with us. And
Thank you, Phil.
of Celsius also. Sorry.
Thank you, Philippe. I'm starting to share my presentation. I hope you can see it. So good morning, everybody. My name is Pavel Bosch. I'm a researcher at the Central European Labour Studies Institute in Bratislava. And me and my colleague Adam Šumik-Rast will present the Slovak case study within this relation between multinational corporations and trade unions. So broadly, our today presentation will focus on the one simple question, whether can the multinational corporations or the employers on this side become more hostile when they see a weak union in the automotive and retail sector in Slovakia. So just for narrow information, within the Slovak case study, we focus on the analysis of 4 companies in the automotive and 2 companies in the retail sector. And from these companies within this today presentation, we focus on those where this hostility towards trade union is actually present in Slovakia. So from automotive, we choose Kia, which is a South Korean automotive company, Stellantis, the former PSA Peugeot Citroën company, also in automotive, and from the retail, the German Lidl company. So if you can see on this in this table, you can see basic information about the companies, when it was established, how many employees they have, and the basic information about the trade union composition of in all of these companies. So when we are starting with the Kia here, because it is a South Korean company, we could talk about a quite specific relation between the company, or between the management and the local trade unions, which was caused by the fact that in South Korea, the South Korean companies are quite hostile towards trade unions. And in 2004, when the Kia came to Slovakia, they also wanted to implement these activities in Slovakia. They even wanted to create a union-free factory in Žilina when they started to build up the Kia factory. But it was
sorry, Pavel, we are still on your first slide. Perhaps you have to move on the screen if you are in the second one.
Okay, and now? Okay. So as I mentioned, when in 2004 they started to build up the Kia factory in Žilina, they tried to make a union-free factory, what was inapplicable in case of Slovakia. And as the time moved, the hostility towards the trade union in Kia started to be less brutal, or less less dramatic, and they even started to cooperate, started to make dialogue with the local trade unions. But still, there are main problems in the relation between these two actors. Second one is the Stellantis, which is basically when the PSA came to Slovakia, it was basically a French company which brought to Slovakia a positive characteristic of positive cooperation with the trade unions. And even in 2007, they implemented the already existing agreement signed by the Industrial International Trade Union into the Slovak factory, and it was focused on the acknowledgement of the essential role of the trade unions on the workplace. So this was a form of a kind showing of kindness towards trade unions. But as in other cases here, the hostility on some level is present. So the main aim of the Stellantis management is still to weaken the position of the trade union on the workplace. And finally, in case of the Lidl, according to our information, even the interviewees accepted this statement that Lidl as a employer has a long-lasting characteristic of a strongly hostile company, even especially in, I think it was a case also in Czechia. And Lidl is famous about its own benefit system. So for them, it's not quite good if they have a trade union present on the workplace. And when in 2016, so 12 years after the entering of the Slovak market, the OZK, which is a metal industry-based trade union, so not even a retail sector trade union, started to operate within Lidl, they recognized it as a form of insult towards the company. So that they were not very happy that they have a trade union in the company. And also, as in case of Stellantis or Kia, there are activities based on which they're trying to blocking the activity of the trade unions. For example, the trade union representatives is not allowed to create a union office within the company, or there are problems with the paid release for the trade union representatives. But on the other hand, in case of the Lidl trade union, is visible a quite strong transformation or quite strong visibility in the last couple of years. And they even started to mobilize themselves through the Facebook. They created an own Facebook page, which has two main reasons. It has an informative and also recruitment character. So they are inform members about the new activities, the benefits, and so on. But also they are recruiting new members through this Facebook page. Okay, moving forward. So the main question of our presentation was whether the employers can be more hostile towards trade unions if they see a weakness. Based on the Slovak findings, we could simply say yes, that they have a possibility, but we need to say that it's not in brutal way. So they are trying to blocking, they are trying to negatively lobbying, so they are trying to create a direct channel to the workers. They're trying to make some decision making directly with the workers and not through the trade union. These hostile activities or these anti-union activities are mostly interconnected or related to the domestic practicalities of the trade union of the companies of the parent company. So they are trying to import these practicalities also into Central and Eastern Europe, mostly because they are expecting that here are weak trade unions with weak or small trade union density, and also they are focusing on cheap labor force. So they are thinking that they are thinking that they will have a easier job with the keeping workforce under control, what in some case is not true. So basically, we could say that the employers with this hostility are trying to demonstrate the control over their own agenda, but also they are formulating decisions or negotiations according to the local standards and principles. And of course, the trade unions also focusing on some own initiatives, and they are a member of international trade unions, what even in a little bit brings for them a bigger position when they are negotiates. So thank you so much, and now I give the floor for my colleague Adam Shumikrast.
Yes, just very shortly to sum up on these basic questions of whether the employers can become more hostile when they see the union weaknesses in the context of the current developments in the two cases, that is the Lidl and the Kia. So regarding the Kia car company, let's say that our thesis is confirmed as the relationship between the union and the employer is, after the first very turbulent years, now stable and satisfactory. The union, let's say, has established the standard working conditions, and there is currently a collective agreement signed for 3 years. The situation at Lidl supports our thesis in opposite direction. The employer displays tolerance towards union strictly according to the law standards in the labor code, but any further activities of the union are ignored, and the employer does not address various deficiencies. For example, there are discrepancies regarding the division of working time and overtime. The Lidl claims to have different interpretations of the problems every time. Additionally, releasing trade union members for union activities is problematic. There are various obstacles from the employer side, and not enough employees are released for these activities. And related to this, the fact that the recruitment process for the union is slow, and the membership strength is not at a high level. Okay, so that is all from our side, and thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, and I think also a very interesting case. We don't have so many information about the Korean multinational, and I think that's all the analysis of Kia and the hostility, huge hostility at the beginning against the trade unions is really fascinating, and also all the stabilize the situation in Slovakia, which is also perhaps a lesson drawing for them if they return, and it would be interesting if there is any impact in Korea. I think also the use of Facebook and the role of trade union leadership is also in different of the contribution, the role of changing leadership and having more innovative leadership. So I think that's also for the debate. I let that for the debate. Now we have Tibor that will address the case of Hungary. Is also a member of CELSI, so that we finished the CELSI team thing with Tibor. Perhaps not, have to verify. Tibor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Philippe. My name is Tibor Messman. So as you mentioned, Philippe, I'm indeed the last in the group of CELSI researchers. And I will present without the formal presentation, just reflect on the question that I received from Martin Mayant that reads, do multinational companies bring good practices from home? Do they import a company culture to Hungary? I'm also lucky in the sense that I come after speakers from other countries. So because Branko Bembic Monica, Adam, and Pavel already reflected on some economic and structural aspects of unionization and multinational companies. I will reflect more on this company variation, especially related to good practice, and having in mind this issue that we deal with as researchers: is there hybridization, or is there some sort of improvement in industrial relations because of appearance of multinational companies in countries of Central Eastern Europe that were typically driven by FDI in their development. So Branko Bembic also said in his presentation, the very beginning of presentation, that there was no negative impact on industrial relations. So this is, let's say, my beginning of my answer, but I start with the question to that: was there a positive impact? So Hungary has, unlike Slovenia and to some extent, Slovakia, and some extent Czechia, a more decentralized industrial relations system, which means that there are much more. It means especially that there are much more autonomy to the company and to the company to establish its industrial relations system. But my short answer to the question is on whether some multinationals bring good practices. So I would say that there are some companies that indeed do bring good practices, but this differs obviously by companies. It differs also by time. And so the other part, and probably the most interesting part of my answer, is if we observe processes over time, so diachronically, and then we get a much more complex answer. So in my answer, then I will also reflect a little bit with my experience and answers that I received from trade union representatives, from Hungarian retail and automotives. So at the first level, the answer that I received, that the home country effect matters, but to some extent. So there was one example for the metal sector, when the unionist said that there was a big difference between, in his region where he was a union representative, there was a big difference between how companies that were coming from Germany vis-a-vis Switzerland or China, for instance, reacted to the union introduction. So on the one hand, what I mean here and what my respondent meant here is that a German manager at the company that was recently established already knew what is collective bargaining, what is a trade union, etc. Whereas in some other cases where the institutions of collective bargaining and also the presence of trade unions is not that much clear-cut, this was much more difficult. So to give just like a picturesque example, in the first case, the manager would invite the union to sit down and to have a brief conversation. In the other hand, they would depart after a few seconds. So this is the one aspect. The other part, which also seemed to matter, is the regional labor market context. So basically, in which regions, so I mean in the regions in the sense of whether this is a high unemployment region with poorer employment standards, etc., or better employment standards, this relocation, this opening of multinational happened. So here, what is also interesting is that in this sense, trade unions found it more difficult to start this kind of conversation with multinationals, and as many scholars say, that it needs to, in order to establish industrial relations and implement also, let's say, good practices. So for instance, and especially this was the case in regions where higher unemployment, the union found it much more difficult to establish itself. So there was no, let's say, less incentives for, or more fear among employees to start organizing, especially because it seemed that the company provides better employment prospects, better wages, and there was this kind of natural situation. Then the second level is what I would also mention here, because it's turned out from my respondents also that it wasn't clear-cut whether a German, like a company from Germany, would necessarily be good, right? So indeed, company philosophy mattered. So in this sense, we cannot say that all German multinational companies were union friendly, but they did know, as I mentioned earlier, they did know about unions and the importance of collective bargaining, and also to some extent also about works councils, the institution of works councils. And then this is again like the other part with where the processes over time kick in, is change in management. So many of my respondents, both in retail and automotive, said that in the beginning, let's say, in a company that established good practice, there was a works council, established trade union, there was a change in management, typically a change to domestic managers, and then, let's say, more rigid or even more hostile relationships developed between unions and management. And basically, many of the unions had to overcome some sort of a crisis with the representative of the employer. Some of my respondents, and this was especially the case in retail, told me that the country of origin of the managers also mattered, and to some extent, surprisingly or not surprisingly, many of my respondents said that the Hungarian managers are the worst because they know the labor market conditions, they know the fears of employees, and they can establish practices that can also lock out the union, for instance, increasing wages for selected group of employees, and also establishing some practices that make the everyday life of union representatives very difficult. So altogether, this is in a nutshell what I wanted to say. Altogether, I think, and just reflecting briefly to the originally posed question, I think there is a big hybridization still going on, and it very much matters not only on multinationals, but also on the attitude and activity of trade unions, whether good practices get established. Thank you very much.
Okay, and thank you for presenting this variation and different variation within the different nationality, and at the end the role of both sides to arrive in kind of new situation. I think that's we have one question also, which seems to be in the chat, and then I give the floor to the Polish case, but it's about the solidarity and the role of the European international level. So for perhaps the previous speaker, we have three broad questions: the coalition, the media, and I think I would like to add solidarity for organizing the debate. There is at least two questions in the Q&A. And please continue to put your question. So now is the Polish chapter, which was written by Jan and Maciej, both working at the Warsaw School of Economics, and Maciej, you will present. I think I don't see Jan as participant, so you will present the Polish case. And according to what Martin said at the beginning, we go worse and worse, so that we make something worse than the in case, but perhaps not. Let's see.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me? Thank you. Yes, I hope Jan will return to us quite soon, because he's a much better speaker, and I have quite bad conditions today because I'm conducting some additional care responsibility commitments due to, not only the social dialogue in Poland is not very brilliantly conducted, but also some of our public services are not very perfect, far from being perfect. Sorry. Apologize for the situation, but I have no other options. I will share my screen now, if I may, of course. Sorry, just a moment. Yes. Do you see this? Yes. Well, teacher essentials. Hopefully, I will tell quite soon. Yes. Maybe Romanian case study, but maybe managed. So we prepared some a bit unusual presentation, some guidelines for multinational corporations investing in Poland. Of course, these guidelines don't recommend, but maybe give some illustration on how it works in Poland. First, I would like to inform you that we conducted 4 case studies, and this presentation is about 3 of them, since one of them, Volkswagen, Poznań, Volkswagen brand, this presentation is completely not about Volkswagen. Volkswagen is a reliable, reasonable, quite honest towards trade unionists. Yes, they are really they adopted this policy in Poland, and for the most part, trade unions are very satisfied cooperation with them. So this is about 3 other our case studies. All of them had to be anonymized. I think Martin wasn't very happy with that, but it was really some requirement, expectation of them. Some of them even, some of our interviewees even mentioned that there was some legal action against him after he gave some opinion in media. So we had to secure this anonymity of our interviews. So really, the issue is about attitudes towards trade representatives. First, all of our 3 cases are they tend to be very fair, of course, from the formal point of view. They care for a compliance with regulations in Poland. They care for also for PR purposes. They generally tend to very reasonable employers, but at the same time they do really much for just for reducing the role of trans, just to convince that trade unions are unnecessary, are useless, even that everything what employees need can be provided by the proper units of the company. So HR units cope with all problems, assure all compliance with labor law, assure the best possible working conditions. It's the main message of our companies. Yes, that according to our case. What maybe example.
The sound is not very good, so perhaps I know that you are in difficult situation.
Yes. Sorry. Maybe I will approach. I will approach.
A little bit because sometimes
Yes.
to hear.
Yes,
So
yes.
sorry.
I try to not. I do try to not to move. I'm very sorry. Yes. So I think quite interesting example was our implementation of this directive on informing and consulting, information and consultation generally failed because there are very few works councils in Poland, and they play very marginal role. But for our companies, from our cases, it was even too much. Yes, one of the company established some body which is called Employees Forum, and generally issues which deals encompass, for instance, many in the company canteen, such issues. Yes. Theoretically, everybody can put some complaints, some suggestions, some opinions to the mailbox anonymously, but still any really serious issue is skipped simply. So generally, all this is very superficial, so artificial, let's say, bogus. Yes, very many adjectives fit here, just to show that this role of unions is limited purposely by the employer side. Yes, maybe some other. Yes, what employers do? Well, they limit the visibility of trade unions. For instance, there is one trade union, and the message after each every discussion is that trade unions had some opinion. So just to bear the situation, just to even not name the organization. Sometimes when some suggestions, some proposals are given by the trade union, they are rejected. But then after some time, they are actually introduced, but not mentioning the trade union that as initiator of these changes. Yes, so many such actions just to diminish the role of trade unions. Also some technical issues. For instance, one of our companies didn't allow to use email accounts. Employee just was provided by the employer to communicate with the members by leaders. There are some other, maybe skip this. Of course, all of these three cases, unlike Volkswagen, had no collective bargaining at all. Sometimes some of our interviewees were putting much effort to initiate or conclude some collective bargaining, but all of this failed. There were also some great issues regarding European Works Councils. The most interesting example, I think, it was the company where it took 10 years to establish European Works Council, so quite a long time. Of course, there were some random events, some personal changes, but still it shows how enthusiastic is employer on such initiatives. Yes, and generally, this there is very weak company level social dialogue. Of course, sectoral level is even weaker. So generally all these companies make use of what they need in Poland why they invest in our country. So of course it is such consequence of some environment which generally not beneficial for the trade unions. So thank you very much. And again, I apologize for this situation and these conditions. Fine, sorry.
No worries. That's kind of I think it was very clear, and thank you for this kind of multitasking, and it's important to arrange that. Jan just appeared, so perhaps you want to add something from the presentation, Jan, or you just arrived and didn't had the chance to listen to.
Jan, you are muted now.
Jan? He seems to have a problem.
Jan is muted, apparently,
Okay.
or has no microphone.
Okay, perhaps we will move to the next Romania, and Jan, if you want to intervene later, you have you are there. But there is no sound. I don't know what's happened. So what I propose that we move to the next case, Romania. Thank you, Aurelian, to be there. You are also teaching at the National University in Bucharest, and Jan, if you want to intervene later, no problem, or in the discussion. So we are in one of the other worst case according to Martin. So let's verify that.
Yes, thank you very much, Philippe. I will not use the slides, but I will start, in fact, with the conclusion of my presentation that regards the afterwards of the development in the Romanian industrial relations model, because in December 2022, far after the completion of this edited book and the Romanian chapter, there were changes in the social dialogue regulations that affected both the representativeness of trade unions, both the establishment of trade unions, but also the collective bargaining and collective agreements, not necessarily in the bad way, but rather in reduction of the minimum number of employees that are necessary to establish a trade union, a reduction in the threshold for representativeness, and also reintroduction as legal for the collective bargaining and collective agreements at the national level. Therefore, at least in theory, it looks like the regulations are getting back on track to the pre-2011 moment when they were changed during the anti-crisis and austerity measurements established by a right-wing government. In the Romanian chapter, I approached 5 cases, 3 from retail, Auchan, Selgros, and Metro Cash and Carry, and 2 from the automotive sector, namely Ford and Michelin. And I tried to look at 2 dimensions of the social dialogue. Because when representing their members' interests in the social dialogue at the company level, there is an equilibrium that the local trade union leaders have to find between both internal factors and external factors. And by internal factors, I mean strategies of the trade unions, the preferences of the local management, the national regulations, and the industrial relations model that is set up by these regulations and the institutions, but also the alliances that they make with other stakeholders. And last but not least, the transfer of know-how between union organizations. As concerns the external factors that they have to cope with, I would mention, for example, the preferences of the headquarter management, and also the ineffectiveness of the European Works Council's framework towards establishing and developing a transnational social dialogue. At least this ineffective is what I concluded from the interviews that I conducted in these sectors. The outcome of this dance between internal and external factors is an adaptation on one side, but also a fight for survival of trade unions. And last but not least, a dependence upon the management, both local management and headquarters management. As such, we're looking at internal factors in these two sectors. It seems that the fragmentation of the sector influences the unionization, as well as the concentration of the economic sector. The automotive sector in Romania, for example, is 10 times more concentrated in terms of workforce, but also in terms of turnover, and has 4 times fewer employees compared to the retail sector. On the other hand, we have a unionization of about 20% in the automotive sector in Romania, according to some empirical research, and about 2% unionization rate in retail sector. The concentration, therefore, increases or tends to increase the structural power of employees in the automotive sector because the labor market is much tighter, but it can also increase the competitiveness between firms. And this, therefore, reduces the collaboration of companies in setting up employers' organizations. As a result, when looking at the national level social dialogue or social dialogue, the internal social dialogue, we can observe that in the automotive sector, there is no representative employer organization at the national level, but there is a representative trade union at the national level. Whereas in the retail sector, we have a mirrored image where there is no representative national trade union and only an employer organization that is representative. And this has to do not only with the way that the regulations are set up, but also with the fragmentation and concentration of these two sectors. We're looking at the way that the transnational social dialogue influences this national social dialogue. I analyzed, and some details are, of course, in the chapter, in the edited book, that the European Works Councils can be a source of increased employee participation from the subsidiaries in the what we would call corporate governance of the multinational corporations. However, the reality is some way mixed, and sometimes, at least in my empirical studies, I observed that it is too far from the regulation. To enhance the mirrored image that we have in these two sectors in Romania, I would underline that almost all of the top major multinational corporations in the automotive sector that are active in Romania have established European Works Councils, whereas only about 40% of the top major multinational corporations in the retail sector in Romania have European Works Councils. And on top of that, no Romanian multinational corporations that is headquartered in Romania has established European Works Councils, although they fall under the EU directive requirements. And this leads to a somehow reduced effectiveness of European Works Councils and a lack of producing and a lack of transnational solidarity. And the feedback that was provided by trade union leaders and other local representatives that I interviewed goes toward the idea that at the European Works Council's level, when the delegates are taking part in these meetings, there are two diverse local issues that are discussed. And there is also a lack of peer support for local work collective arrangements or even conflicts. Therefore, when some of the delegates from national subsidiarities feel weaker, there is no room for solidarity. And when there is a crisis, the solidarity is gone, as one of my interviewed persons recollected. The lack of organized trade union in a multinational corporation can also be explained by its replacement by employee representatives that greatly reduces the effectiveness of collective bargaining at company level. Therefore, the management can more easily control the company level social dialogue by nominating the employee representatives and formally obtaining the employee approval for these representatives. And this is one of the major flowbacks of the European Works Council's directive, even the recast directive. One of the interviewed person recollected that the local management reaches more easily the targets if there is no trade union around, but only an employee representative, which is in general nominated by the local management and afterwards elected by the employees. And this allows the collective bargaining to take only about 2 hours to be completed, with the farewell lunch included, while when there is a trade union established, the management would negotiate for much longer time and in a much harder way. Therefore, the transnational solidarity is quite hard to be achieved by current EU regulations, such as the European Workforce Council's Directive, and it is more effective when developed in, I would say, a natural way via the support of international trade unions. Thank you. And if there are questions, I can address them as well. There are plenty of details in the chapter. I hope that I used my my time limit.
Yeah, thank you, thank you, Aurélien. I think that you put one element which is also in the Q&A is what is the role of the government? As you mentioned, the center-right government. So perhaps we have 15 minutes, 20 minutes for the exchange. So that could be interesting, but also the limitation of the European Works Council, which is part of the global question that we have in the Q&A about the international and European level. But I have also a question that I would be interested if you can answer, because you spoke about the transfer of know between the trade unions, and I would like to have your opinion from your study and your knowledge in your country. Is there a kind of transfer or no of good practice, or there is kind of or you have more kind of individual case and some experience that are succeeding but are not expanding, or at least doesn't transfer in a kind of new strategy from the trade union? Because we are here also with or case studies in kind of putting in evidence innovative practice or bad practice, but we are more interested by innovative practice, but not knowing if it's go broader than the case that you study. So I would like to have your opinion on that. So I will be relaxed. That's the first raising the hand. So that's a general question. But you have also...
Should I answer now, or should I leave it for the Q&A, or did we already start the Q&A?
We start the Q&A. That's I summarized So who want to take the floor on this question, perhaps of transfer or no? Is there is kind of...
Well, since I was the one that specifically mentioned this transfer, and you raised the question, I suppose, to me, I would say that there is both a transfer of good practice and individual experience. And it looks like this, or the source of this good practice and individual experience is rather at the sectoral level. In the retail sector, when I interviewed local and sector level trade union leaders and employee representatives. They argue that without this transfer of knowledge, without the support, without the observing good practices that were provided via the sectoral level, national level trade unions, and without the individual experience of these national level trade unions, it would have been almost impossible, or at least with higher costs, also in terms of time, to establish company level trade unions. In addition, it would have been impossible for employees in companies, in multinational corporations that took adversarial positions towards trade unions to be forced to force the local management to accept the existence of trade unions. And Auchan, for example, was one of the case studies that supported this conclusion that indeed the individual experience and the good practice together with the for example, international solidarity with international allies, including including World Bank, for example, would support an establishment of trade unions. But again, the details about the involvement of World Bank in the retail Auchan case in Romania are in the chapter.
Okay, good to remind that you have to read this very, very interesting book. Jan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I'm very sorry because Maciej probably told you, I'm just, funny thing is that actually I'm in Brussels for a meeting that is just about to start. But I really wanted to join you just for a brief period of time. So this is more like a general comment than a specific comment to Aurelian, although I think I totally share his point of view, and just wanted to maintain very clearly. I'm sorry for the noises in the background, so I will be very short. I just wanted to emphasize what Maciej said, although of course, as you could see, we made it in a quite a satirical way. So I hope that nobody really got offended by that particular form, but in a way, I mean, sarcasm and irony aside, this is what we, this is basically our conclusion, which is actually, you know, quite pessimistic. And this is what we expressed in our chapter, that we believe, based on, not just believe, but based on empirical evidence we have gathered, it is mostly opportunistic behavior that we have observed. So again, sorry, apologies, you know, for a little disturbance on my part, but I mean, I really enjoyed that part of the seminar, of the webinar that I could hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, Martin, and you're mute. You're mute, Martin.
Unmute, but I wanted to answer the question that Philippe posed after the first two contributions. I tried to put it on the question and answer, but I think it disappeared. I don't know how that works. Why does international solidarity seem to work better in retail than in automotive? And we don't know. We didn't ask specifically that question, but there are a number of things that seem to me possible explanations. And incidentally, it's definitely true. It definitely in retail, there was a very common response. It was extremely important to us that the Western European Trade Union went to the company management and said, you will recognize the union in that country. We understand you haven't. And will you please get on the phone immediately and tell them they're to do it. We want the meeting this afternoon. It seemed to work very well. One reason, maybe the experience of the Western European Trade Union is similar. They too had to go through battles for recognition, setting up an organization at the beginning, and in many of the ones in manufacturing industry, the people in positions in unions came into a situation where a union already existed. They don't have experience of that one. Another reason is there's no conflict between the Central Eastern European Union and the Western European one. There's no fear you're taking jobs from us, because in retail, it just doesn't work like that. Whereas it is absolutely clear in manufacturing, if Stellantis, when it was Peugeot originally, when they set up their factory in Slovakia, no, we're not taking jobs from France. Shortly afterwards, they closed the factory in Paris, and look, the new model is being made in Slovakia. Obviously, there's a basis for conflict. How do we resolve it? Why does it seem to be different in some countries from others? That the Czech one, when I did a bit of research before we started on this and speaking to the trade union leader in retail in Czechia, she said there's not a single case where we did not get important support from Western Europe. Why does it not work like that in Poland in the same way, where I think the position is still that there is no collective bargaining in any retail chain? What's the difference there? Why can't they do the same thing? Well, not for me to say that Polish unions could necessarily do it better, but it's quite easy for the Czech unions when there is one united confederation that is the dominant one and represents most of the people in retail, and it's very easy for them to say we are the Czech trade union, very easy for them to be a channel for establishing the contact. I don't know why it's different in different countries, but it certainly works in some, and is very important. European Works Councils, we got a lot of negative comments in this study. We also got a lot of quite positive ones, but the problem with the European Works Council, it's okay for making contact, it's okay for getting information, but it's not really a channel into the top management in the multinational company, which a lot of the trade unionists are hoping it will be. So they're going to be disappointed and frustrated. But if they use it, if they're aware of its limitations and find the other way of getting that contact through to the top management, then maybe it's a useful stepping stone. And those seem to be the two views that we were getting back, that a possible stepping stone, but you can be frustrated if you hope for more. So that's my contribution at this point.
I think, Tibor, you had at one point your hand raised, but no longer. So I don't want if you want to take the floor.
Yes, thank you. I just wondered whether I need to still reflect on some of the questions that were raised earlier by the audience about the union initiatives in the business service sector and young people motivation to organize. So very briefly, I think in Central Eastern Europe this is the, like, if the person who asked this question, the business service means under business service sector, let's say temp agencies and the similar sector, then there is very little going on in Central Eastern Europe. So as far as I know, unions are not based in or within temp agencies as such. And in that sense, the situation is alarming, and I would say that something needs to be done, taking also the good practice from implementing some good practice from Western Europe. Then there is also this question about the political literacy of young people. So yeah, I also have, let's say, I'm not, I hear common complaints among unions about the non-unionization of younger cohorts of workers, but I mean, this just means that there is a bigger need to general social emancipation for younger people. and in general for more marginalized groups. So it would mean a bigger campaign, not only within trade unions, but in a larger society, in my view. And just one more quick reflection on the question on whether multinationals have protective or receive additional power, or are they backed up by national governments? This was related mostly to Slovakia, but here I would link up my answer to what Martin already said to some extent, that there is also difference between sectors. So for instance, for Hungary, I see that in automotives, indeed, multinationals have an additional, let's say, power, leverage, as they backed up from the government, but this is not the case in retail. So the picture is, I would say, more mixed than that. But governments definitely have an additional role.
Okay, thank you. If someone want to, we arrive slowly to the end of the webinar, but if one of the participants want to add something, feel free. No, Monica, no, Branko, no. So thank you all. I think that was really a fascinating presentation. I think it also gave a good vision of what this book is, and this book has a lot of information, but it's not a so big book. So that's good to have short chapter, not 50 pages each, but with as you have seen, subtle comment, balanced view, and good insight for ongoing discussion, because as we know, it's far from finished. This discussion, and so thank you all. Thank you, Martin, for having organized the book, and Maria Nikolova for having organized the webinar. Have a nice day, and I hope to see you somewhere very soon. Thank you, and thank you all the audience and the question. Bye. And you can download the book. There is the link on the chat if you want to download the book. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Very
Bye.
much. Goodbye.
Bye.